Hello and welcome back to WCS Challenger. We are going into the NA playoffs today as we just completed Europe, Cyril being the champion. My name is Fear Dragon, and joined with me here today is Zombie Grub. On her very wonderful birthday, she decided the best way to spend it was to cast some StarCraft. How's it going?
Exactly. They gave me an option because it's my birthday not to cast StarCraft and just go out and like party. And I was like, no, this is the party.
Okay, well, as everyone knows, the government has legally mandated that you are allowed to request a birthday gift from Twitch chat today. So what do you want from Twitch chat?
Oh my God. I want Twitch chat to be super nice to everyone today.
Oh my God. Everyone, compliment the person above you. Tell them how nice they look. Tell them that their race is balanced. Because we have got a balanced little roster here today for Challenger. If you're not familiar with the format for Challenger, let's talk about that. Somehow you might have missed out on how this works. There are 16 players that manage to qualify for Challenger through the ladder, through open qualifiers, through invites from WCS points. 8 of those players have managed to make it here today to the playoffs, where it's going to be a single elimination bracket. And we're going to determine who is the best player in North America after all. We know that the best player in Europe is actually Cyril now, but still have to figure that out for your NA. And of course, they're going to be playing for a pretty awesome $10,000 prize pool, $1,600 for first place. Whoever takes that first place prize, $1,200 for second place, so on and so forth. And all those WCS points are going to matter a lot for seeding for not only WCS spring and summer, but even for the next season of Challenger.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for your contributions there, Zombie Grub. But let's go ahead and take a look at all the matches we have today, because I already mentioned it's a single elimination bracket. We got 8 players here. We're starting off the day with MaSa versus PiLiPiLi. After that, we're going to be going to Jon Snow versus Silky, then Estrella versus TLO, and then Puck versus Neeb. Zombie Grub, what are your favorite matches in this lineup?
Oh, boy. Favorite matches?
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go with Jon Snow versus Silky, but then In Control might tweet at me and make fun of me, so I don't know what to say. But seriously, I think we have some maybe one-sided potential for some of these series, but for Jon Snow versus Silky, we've talked about this, right? It's almost like either you continue the mantle for Jon Snow, right, and he stays the consistent NA Zerg, or Silky beats him and then gets the mantle. So I like that story the most.
Okay, well, Zombie Grub, I will tell you that this first match is maybe the one that I am the most excited for, and it's not necessarily because originally 10 minutes ago I was like, this is going to be the highlight match. It's because PiLiPiLi originally had his race set to Terran, and then MaSa was like, well, if you're going to play Terran, I'll play Protoss. Actually, okay, never mind. They did switch back. I can't tell the difference when they're memeing or not, because we're going to get started soon. And they're like, no, let's swap races.
I mean, not that we should know this or anything, but they're allowed to swap between series and WCS?
I don't think
I don't think so.
I believe you're allowed to swap between series, but not in the actual, between games.
It's almost always been that, maybe between series, but never between games. That's pretty much the general rule. But then even then, I thought maybe you had to sign up and just stay your race.
That's possible. But either way, it looks like they're both going to be sitting on their normal races for today. For those who don't know, PiLiPiLi, an old school name, I would say, at this point in the North American scene, has been around for a while, but he's also taken breaks. He's retired to go do bodybuilding and play Dota and all kinds of other things and come back to StarCraft. He's a guy who I would say is someone who really benefits from watching a lot of StarCraft, but doesn't necessarily need to play it as much. He's really good at his just general execution of things, and he picks up stuff really quickly. So
okay.
I'm really excited to see what he's going to be throwing out, because he's going to be the memer in this. MaSa has been looking really strong. I know you got to see a bit of him.
Yeah, but I feel like you could have been describing MaSa.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's one of my favorite things about this.
I mean, this in that way could be a very fun TvP. There could be some meme builds from both sides. There could be some weird base races as they both realize, okay, you're the one being weird. But I think ultimately we're going to see perhaps a one-sided match, even if every single game goes in a weird direction. I think most people are betting on MaSa to win out here.
I would definitely agree with that. I think most people would bet on MaSa. I think the one little caveat, which we'll talk about in a second, is that PiLi actually seems to have a pretty good record versus MaSa in general. I think it has to do with the play styles, but we'll talk about that in a second. We are going to be starting down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, atop the red Protoss player. Originally from Kazakhstan, but now in the US, he is PiLiPiLi. Storm Gaming.
In the top left, As the blue Terran, he is MaSa. OSC Elites, originally from Korea, but lives in Canada.
And this tournament is going to actually be the one that puts him over 100K in total prize money earned.
Nice.
Yeah, so just to talk about what I was saying before, the thing about PiLiPiLi is I think if you had to describe one of the best attributes about PiLiPiLi is that I think he usually has a really good killer instinct. There's a lot of times, especially in North American StarCraft, where someone will try and get away with something a little bit greedy or something, and there's maybe a bit of a moment of vulnerability, but it doesn't always get punished. Actually, if you talk to a lot of people like Kellizer, for example, he said that one of the big differences between playing on NA ladder versus Korean ladder is on NA ladder, you will fall behind or you'll make a mistake or something, but then you don't get really truly punished for it. Whereas on Korean ladder, people will just hone in on it and they'll go kill you. PiLiPiLi is one of those few exceptions where he has that really good game sense to know when he can just go and kill his opponent. And I think MaSa sometimes plays a little bit weird sometimes. It's to his detriment occasionally.
Yeah, okay, I definitely see that. I think what it comes down to, though, is we watch both players doing something a little weird. So PiLi doesn't scout, and MaSa is going one base. He actually tried to even like hide his one base from a potential scout, and it wasn't even necessary. And PiLi has a probe looking like it might play something down. But in the context of the players, like what we're expecting, or what I'm expecting, is that MaSa, who at maybe for winter was like kind of question marking, is he playing a whole ton, and maybe they still aren't playing like the most with finals and school and all that. He has shown that like he just never really loses out that much on his mechanics. Where PiLiPiLi, I think in his group that we saw in the past, well, last week or the week before, I think you did see actual the mechanics weren't that strong, but the killer instinct that you're talking about was absolutely strong enough.
Yeah, and that is going to be the big concern here. PiLiPiLi is one of the guys who, his biggest struggle oftentimes is his mechanics are not always there because he hasn't always been playing a ton. And I know he is really busy right now because, like you said, his finals, he's not like studying for finals week because it's next week. It is actually finals week for him right now. So StarCraft, while it is something that he can earn a lot of money through, he has been a bit distracted and a bit busy with other things, whereas MaSa, I think, has been done for 2 weeks, has just been playing StarCraft. Oh, Widowmine getting a kill on the Stalker. That is a very nice start. Denying some extra of that scouting information that, I know you were talking about this before, PiLi didn't really get any scouting information.
Yeah, so the probe that died to the Marines did, I believe, scout enough to see if there was a command center or not. The Marines, if they had been a little farther forward, could have still kept PiLi in the dark, and that would have been like a real disaster. But I do believe he knows that it's some form of one base, and considering how long it has taken, right, he hasn't seen a proxy barracks or a factory, so we're going to assume something from the starport is going to be the surprise. You can kind of assume that it's going to be Banshees, right? That's the worst case scenario as well, so it's the one that you want to prep for, where if it was a Liberator and you didn't really know, well, hopefully you just pull the probes away and have a Stalker or two, right?
Yeah, losing that first Stalker, if you are going to be dealing with Banshees, is kind of annoying, but he has a second Stalker that popped out, Warp Gate Technology, finishing on up with the extra 4 gateways there, so he should be able to make a few more Stalkers and be able to deal with this. He also has the Observer already out. Oh, but that Observer is making his way across the map. He's about to pop out with a second Observer, but he's going to leave that in the main base, and that does... Oh, actually, no. He has a third Observer. Never mind. He is super covered at every base and getting scouting information.
Nice. I mean, as I said, that can kind of be expected with the units that have not been shown so far. It also may be just something that MaSa does quite a bit. I will throw in there, though, like, because this might be an issue the more games we watch from these two, is that MaSa has been doing high ground CCs. So if PiLi like always relies on that probe scout to the natural later on, he will always have like half the information, right?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things about MaSa. He is all about getting in his opponent's head, so he knows that that is one of the kind of mind games he can play. Now, the Banshees are going to make their way along the south side of the map, but they are not going to catch wind of the Warp Prism going to MaSa's side, and that Warp Prism is going to go to the natural. The Observer gets scanned and picked off, so both these players are going to be hitting each other with their aggression around the same time. It's going to be a little bit about their APM and their ability to multitask here, see who can handle the, I guess, aggression better.
Yeah, really nice turnaround there and a nice warp in from PiLiPiLi. So nothing will happen there, but that's, net gain for Protoss. As he drops the Adepts into the natural, MaSa did not move out with any army and just moves his Cyclone Marine combo, which actually, if the Cyclone's going to top up the Warp Prism, they do not, though. Could have taken it out.
And it's okay. It looks like the Adepts decide to shade out of there, so they don't get the kill on that Cyclone. That was getting a little bit low on hit points. But the Banshees, like you said, got forced back pretty quickly there with a good defense from PiLi.
But at least they're alive, right?
Yeah.
And so we see MaSa go for a later command center, but he is thinking more towards the macro game. He's also thinking more about another M word. Mech. He's got a second factory on the way, a third factory on the way. This guy, he might not, even when he's not playing a whole ton and grinding like, 12 hours on the ladder and really learning the new styles, he'll see something and be like, that looks fun, that looks interesting.
Yep.
Maybe practice it a couple of times, and then he'll actually be like really darn good with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of my favorite examples, which is a little bit on the other side of things, where it actually causes him to lose the game, but he is the kind of player who has multiple times seen a build in GSL and then tried it in a WCS match the next day and lost with it because he was like, I've never actually done, I didn't even practice this once before. I just decided to do it.
You were literally talking about Montreal 2 years ago when the casters couldn't stay up that late, but MaSa apparently did and was like, wow, 2-port Banshee, that sounds amazing. 8 hours later tries it and does ultimately fail, but the point is, like, he was up against someone that was always difficult.
He's not afraid to try out stuff that just looks fun or interesting, is I guess your point.
Yeah.
But Blink is getting closer and closer to finishing here, so those Banshees may have a harder time getting a lot more damage done, although they are going to be sitting, or at least one is sitting over by that third base looking for some opportunities. And the siege tanks are starting to come out here. MaSa's army is going to start getting bigger. We're going to see if PiLi starts feeling comfortable on those 3 bases to finally push out and do something more than just harassment soon.
Yeah. So this is the still kind of new style, even though we've been seeing it for like basically a month at this point, with a lot in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, from all the Terrans in Korea. My experience with it, my concern over mech is a lot of times that early game, depending especially on what the Protoss is doing with like how much harassment they want to do or how much they're actually going to attack you. Banshee's barely surviving. But if you can get to a certain point, like you don't die, you actually get your third set up with the gases, then I feel like mech, that's when you actually see the mech start to roam around, especially Cyclone mech, which, by the way, MaSa's not doing the Cyclone mech. He is going back, well, actually, he's kind of doing both, so I'm not sure how to call this one.
Yeah, I mean, losing both Banshees kind of sucks, but 11 workers killed. This is pretty big, Zombie Grub. Yes, this is, of course, going to be a slow ramp-up build from MaSa, but he's got his own third orbital command finish, and they basically have even-ish workers. There is a big move out over here from PiLi, so maybe he can get something done over here, especially if MaSa unsieges and starts establishing that third base at the absolute worst possible time. But it seems like he's being slow and gradual about it.
Gonna be very careful when pushing out for that third base specifically. And in this case, like extra carefully, sees that the army is actually already there. But with how many tanks he's able to get, nice snipe on that Raven, which is a little too far forward. We'll take a couple tank blasts for it, but absolutely worth taking the Raven out of the equation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even just losing some of the observers is going to be especially annoying because Hyperflight Rotors is nearing completion, and while there aren't many Banshees out on the map right now, it does indicate that he is thinking about maybe getting up some more later, and there's another one starting up.
Yeah, you think the Banshee phase is done, and then suddenly 2 or 3 pop up. It's not even about protecting your probes at that point. A lot of times it's actually just like not letting them get damage on the Immortals or the Stalkers. Speaking of which, the Immortals come forward first. They're going to try and take on this engagement, but this is actually kind of the prime spot for MaSa to defend when his tanks are on that high ground.
Yeah, I think just sniping off some of the forward tanks is kind of nice, just because now you see the tanks aren't really covering the command center anymore. So PiLi can at least force the lift up. He's going to go in over here. Guardian Shield being popped, and the Immortals trying to get the damage done. Zealots making their way on top of the siege tank line. Does PiLi have enough to break him? It looks like it.
Absolutely does. There's not enough Hellions. The Cyclones, they weren't even in numbers that were big enough to really kite against this, and the tanks just cannot hold with the amount of Zealots that showed up. Even with the Immortals and their shield popped, which was the worst case for me, didn't end up mattering.
He hallucinates some Stalkers because he's trying to keep his last remaining Stalker alive, but he is more or less out of anti-air. Some more Stalkers do get warped in, make their way across the map. The Immortals taking some more damage, but PiLi is already doing a lot of damage over here. The Stalkers blink forward. Did he lose his Observer?
No, he still has it.
It's further back.
It's
just slightly out of range. I guess he was concerned about it getting sniped off, but there's the blink forward. He's going to snipe off the Banshees, and I think with that, PiLi is going to show that killer instinct once again and be able to take a really good position in game number 1, most likely the game.
GG. Nice control over that third base, which is the most difficult part, like I was saying. If you either are being controlled by Blink Stalkers or the Warp Prism keeps bothering you, or simply that the Protoss was not bothered by your one base opener and got a smooth macro game, which is what PiLiPiLi did, getting that third base is really difficult.
Yeah.
And with tank styles, too, like, you don't really have any control at all without those Banshees, which eventually died.
Yeah, PiLi seizing the exact right opportunity, like you said, of knowing, okay, well, getting the third base is the big thing I have to shut down. So even though MaSa did a lot of damage with that Banshee, he killed off 11, 12 workers and evened up the worker count versus a Protoss player. That's usually not where a Protoss wants to be, but it takes an extra minute or two for that lack of economy to really kick in. Remember, if you kill off 10, 12 workers, it's not like suddenly my opponent's army is smaller than mine. It is a minute or two later, the warp-in rounds are a little bit slower. There's less immortals or something. So PiLi jumps on the opportunity before that really started kicking in.
Yeah, I feel like there's some like other things that kind of went wrong too. Like MaSa's Banshee opener didn't work out, and while it pinned PiLi back, it wasn't actually doing anything. So he just built up an immortal count and then warped in stalkers, kind of like almost later off a 3-base economy, where MaSa had sacrificed a natural command center for a very long time to do that.
It's definitely true.
And then this third CC, like, it's kind of those weird things where, like, yes, you want to be careful about getting your third, but you also have to. So sometimes faster is better than later, actually, because then maybe you have the economy already working, the gas is already working.
The siege tanks are set up in the position, so it's not like the stalkers are just trying to blink in and snipe them off before they get there.
And then maybe you actually have 5 factory production instead of just 3, which might have been there. And then I think above all, like, to actually like hone in on that last battle, if he had 4 Banshees, so the first 2 are alive and then the 2 he built, he's controlling them like he did at the very last 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
He is roaming around trying to pop immortal shields and trying to find the warping of zealots and kill them before they get on top, and that also was a huge difference. But it was just like a kind of a slow build-up.
Yeah.
And certainly not the game that I expected MaSa to play. Mech aside, just like defensive mech was also not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I wonder if this is going to go back to, I guess, their interactions against each other, where it is oftentimes, PiLiPiLi is a little bit of a memer, right? He is the guy who will also get very in his opponent's face. He made a bit of a name for himself as being a big 2-base all-inner back in the day, and he's quite good at his waves of aggression. So maybe MaSa's just trying to think, how can I play a little bit defensive and just put pressure on him with things like Banshees? But to your point, I would say that last game shows it didn't really work out playing exactly that way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Maybe MaSa was actually a little more scared of PiLi than he was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take it too seriously, because anything that MaSa says, I'm always like, okay, I take this like 10% seriously, 90% of a meme. But he was saying like, no, I'm not memeing at all with PiLi because it's PiLi. Like,
yeah.
And I think the reason why, again, is just because PiLi is the one that will oftentimes be someone who will punish you if you try and get a little bit too tricky.
Yeah, and there's always the player-to-player dynamic, right? That even though we consider X player mechanically better results, more consistent, whatever, this other player, the Z player, is just that style that always bothers them, that messes them up.
Scarlet versus MaSa is one of my favorite ones for exactly that reason, because Scarlet, undisputedly, I mean, even MaSa repeatedly says, Scarlet is way better than me, but I have like a 70 or 50, like 80% win rate versus her because I just am in her head every time.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. So,
well, something is in the internet. The first bee.
Who the heck is that?
Was that Livy Bee?
We make that joke all the time.
What, do we?
Yes. This is an observer that's dropped out before.
Really? I've never seen this observer drop out before.
Maybe he wasn't here.
Okay. I'm so sad that we actually aren't on the in-game screen, because there is an emote that MaSa uses, and I never see anyone else use it. It's
what
like
do you mean is the code?
That's the thing. I don't know what the code is, and he won't tell me. But it's a facepalm emote, and I've never seen anyone else use it.
Okay, wish me luck, Fear Dragon. I'm gonna try and.
Oh my God! Please. Okay, you're looking through the. Okay.
I'm just looking
Don't actually enter it in. There are other people broadcasting. It's a degree of professionalism, Zombie Grub. I know it's your birthday, but you can't get away with everything.
Last week or yesterday, I don't remember which one, you had your phone out on camera.
Yeah, because I was reading a tweet.
Unprofessional.
Oh my God. Otherwise, people will realize that I have a Game Boy phone case, and they'll realize that, I'm advertising Nintendo when clearly we're on a Blizzard's broadcast.
They're going to realize that your phone is from like 5 years ago.
Well, maybe I'm just trying to download Diablo Immortal. Don't you have phones?
Oh, God.
We do have a Reaper expand over here from MaSa, but there is the command center on the low ground this time. PiLi, so he did this in the last game also. He throws down the probe into the bottom right-hand corner of the map to avoid the Reaper. and then he waits until around the time that the Reaper would be moving in, and then he looks like he wants to maybe scout in. If he was going to throw down a proxy, he would have already had a pylon up by now, because, you know, Cybercore finishing up is usually when you're thinking, I'd get a proxy Stargate or a Robo or something.
You're saying all these really important things, but I'm still trying to find that emote.
I'm telling you, it's not there.
It's not there, you're right.
So this is like a mild little note while we see the Reaper getting pushed back here by the Stalker. But for those who don't know, there are actually, for a really long time, and even still to this day, there are secret emotes out there. And I've talked with the dev team and stuff, and they've been like, yeah, people still haven't found all of the emotes that exist in StarCraft. So go looking for them.
MaSa's
found one.
All right, goodbye, Probe.
Well,
all right,
he does get a scout out, which is nice. And he saw the tech lab on the factory, I think.
No.
No?
No.
Oh. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, so he didn't see that. You could predict, of course, the starport right after that factory is finished, but didn't see that either. MaSa, busy searching for what PiLiPiLi's doing. He does see the Twilight Council. No, he actually only saw the gas and the Simon X core. Barely didn't get far enough back. But with the, like, now 2 stalkers shown, I mean, you're kind of taking away the idea of the Stargate. And then now he sees the Twilight Council, so would have been something I think he would have guessed regardless. So on the subject of that, like that last thing I said when we were talking about that last game about how like defensive mech wasn't what I was expecting. MaSa, I really thought if he was going to do whatever, bio or mech, that he would do some type of 1 or 2 base push, especially considering he like was on 1 base last game. But maybe because he's afraid of PiLiPiLi more than like he thinks he can attack him, I don't know, then we might not see that, and that'll just contribute to the uncomfortableness.
He actually forced the lock-on onto
That's
the probe.
really nice.
Oh, MaSa is going to lose that lock-on ability for a bit, so the Stalker's get a bit more damage, but he has to be careful because now the Cyclone can chase him down.
Yeah.
Taking some damage, but the Cyclone also needs some time to actually get repaired back up.
Yeah. The Cyclone actually does not stand up to 2 or 3 like stalkers like alone.
That are well microed,
unless the micro is absolutely perfect and has like tons of room to maneuver. So you always have to be a little bit careful when you think that you're the bully in the playground. It's actually the stalkers. Stalkers do lose some health for that, but they're going to come back with potential like vengeance with Blink and a couple more. He doesn't like that. He doesn't know there's not a drop on the way or a Liberate or something like that, but you do see the Cyclone first, so no Widow Mine this time, which grabbed that Stalker last game. And if he came back in, he would see the tank blast the Stalkers apart, so would maybe not really do a lot of damage.
Well, we do have the 2 barracks down here, and another barracks being added on here for MaSa, so it seems like he's probably not going to be going into that mech style he tried last game. Didn't work out so well. But with the Warp Prism coming on out, PiLiPiLi's going to try and put on a little bit of pressure himself. He doesn't have to worry about the Banshees or anything this game. There's Stim coming on up, so mostly just the Stalkers can actually seize a little bit more map control once he realizes, yeah, there's actually not a whole lot of pressure coming his way, so for a bit.
He's not just going to be seizing map control, he also might be just initiating an attack. Unless MaSa pushes first, in which case he'll just defend. But he is going for a lot of gateways off of only Blink. No Forge, no charge on the way, so Warp Prism's coming across the map. He will be looking for the pickoff on the, or MaSa will be looking to pick off on the Observer, but you can still,
he's going to get it.
You can still have the Warp Prism right, have the high ground vision, as well as maybe hallucination if you think you can't otherwise get the high ground.
Oh, I wonder if that positioning for the Observer and the fact that it's set up right there is going to be a little bit of a reveal, because usually it's not really scouting anything, but there's the big blink forward. The Siege Tank number 1 gets picked off. Siege Tank number 2 getting focus fired down. It goes down. It's just Marines over here, and they don't have Stim or anything, so they do have a hard time versus the Stalkers once the numbers build up.
That's kind of it.
Yeah.
There's not enough. Okay, another tank. Okay, so another tank did just pop out, but that's going to get blinked on. Medivacs are going to go down. Stim is not done. And the SVs have to be pulled, but PiLiPiLi's close to even another Warp in. Just gotta make sure the Warp Prism doesn't die.
And I love this. Using the Warp Prism to microback some of the Stalkers that have Blink on cooldown. He does lose a few more of them, and like you said, keeping that Warp Prism alive is really key here. Stim is so close to finishing, but still gonna be another 30 or so seconds. If PiLiPiLi warps in some more Stalkers and blinks up, it's trouble.
Maybe like another tank popped out. Maybe this can do it. The SEV pool. The tank's not being blinked upon this time, so it's going to get a couple of shots. Okay, literally 2, I think.
Yeah, and he saves the blink to blink out of the way of the SCVs there.
Okay.
MaSa's starting to hold over here. And remember, this is a really committed attack from PiLiPiLi. He hasn't gotten on top of the production or anything. I love the round of Zealot Warpins considering how many Marauders there are and the fact that SCVs keep being pulled, and they're not going to hold up quite as well versus these Zealots.
He almost got the interference matrix. Like, he wanted it before the Warpin happened, and that would have been really big, not to have to deal with extra Stalkers, extra Zealots. The micro on the tank is pretty good, finding it better on Siege than Siege. MaSa loses 16 workers, so that is a pretty severe loss, but if he can actually get time to get Combat Shields finished as well, and a decent number of units. He does have 5 barracks, although 2 of them not with an add-on. Then maybe something can happen.
The bunker is going to go down before the Marines and Marauders can get here.
He actually has enough to already bully this back.
Yeah.
When I said that this was looking like it already was game over, the tank I thought was on the way, but very consistent production. The macro held up behind all that. If he didn't have that one tank at every single time, then I think it is game over. But he has now gotten to the amount of bio that is necessary to hold off against Stalkers.
Yep, it's time for the Desperation Dark Shrine. And then one thing that PiLiPiLi did do was he took out a lot of workers and he took out a lot of the economy there for MaSa. So maybe he's hoping he's going to be able to catch MaSa in this awkward spot where he doesn't really want to be saving scans for something like a Dark Shrine follow-up. But remember, PiLiPiLi doesn't really have a lot of tech behind this. Just Blink Stalkers only do so well for so long. So if MaSa decides to get aggressive, that's going to be a problem. And that Raven is still around. So these Stalkers, if they can snipe off that Raven, that opens up that transition to do a lot more damage.
Yeah. It's a very good point. It's probably what PiLiPiLi is going to be looking at, but now MaSa doesn't need that Raven on the front line. That was also an incredible tool to have alive consistently, throwing down at least one auto turret or the interference matrix that actually did stop 2 units from getting out of the War Prism. But yeah, he kept it alive, and that will put a damper in the DT potential. But if he tries to move forward, that's when the Raven is probably most vulnerable, or he just simply doesn't have anything back at home to defend, despite having detection.
Yeah.
That's what PiLiPiLi is going to be looking for, as well as just general time buying.
As a side note, just for that big attack, I do want to commend MaSa on doing something that only a few Terrans I feel like are really, really focusing on these days, which is building all your production to the far right. You can imagine if that Blink Stalker attack was coming in and this factory was way further over to the left like a lot of Terran players do, the Tech Lab gets picked off with the Siege Tanks are more vulnerable. I don't actually think MaSa holds that if his production was further to the left.
That's a very good point. He was quite good about that. And these depths, actually not going to get too much. I think they were tangoing with a Marine or 2. So.
Finally killing 4 workers, but that took a long time.
It really did. Meanwhile, the army found the Stalkers, sharking around, looking again to buy time and maybe blinking back in. And now that they're officially bullied back, he might be able to go ahead and continue the push. Where is the Raven? The Raven does not go over the DT. It goes to the left. That sucks, but you know what? There's enough army back here to deal with 1 DT, and he was even preparing for that with a missile turret.
Yeah. What is that? Four workers really going down there, and there is the Warp Prism still alive just above MaSa's main base. He's going to move in, probably warp in another DT or 2, trying to get some damage up, but he still needs to be able to handle this army right here. PiLiPiLi operating with no upgrades. He is going to be able to snipe off the Raven, and now if he can use the DTs effectively, he can start to bully this back. Getting a DT on top of the Siege Tanks would be big, but that's still so much bio, and the anti-armor missile is going to effectively give MaSa a +3 weapon upgrade. GG, MaSa taking game number 2, tying up the series.
Really well done. He also had an army with another missile turret in the main base. It really wasn't going to do anything. He followed that up perfectly, but that was a scary beginning.
Yeah.
The fact that one of his 2 tanks wasn't sieged, because I think you're right, he did know that the attack was on the way, we see here, and he was maneuvering his army up. That's what almost led to a catastrophe, but because his production was actually already up and running, he had another tank, follow suit, just always barely in time. You didn't get that snowball effect where they start being able to blink in base, microing, right? If that happens, they just start taking down Marine after Marine after Marauder, and you die. But he was able to hold on and get that crucial amount of bio, right? That actually just completely demolished the Stalker.
Yeah, it definitely got very, very close. I really like the Zealot Warpins over here that we also were seeing from PiLiPiLi. I mean, this is the other funny thing about PiLiPiLi is he is an old school memer, so he is very, very good with I think he actually came up a lot in the era of Blink Stalker all-ins versus Terran back in Heart of the Swarm and stuff. PiLiPiLi's been around for a while, so he's had a lot of practice executing those kind of things. It didn't work out this time. MaSa was barely able to defend there, but it was a super narrow defense. And PiLiPiLi, he was able to win the first game, so now it's just a tied-up series. It's still anyone's game here.
Yeah. And maybe PiLiPiLi finally acting exactly as MaSa was expecting, being the aggressor.
Yeah.
This time works out. Maybe PiLiPiLi recognizes that and is like, okay, macro game that it is, but these guys, I mean, they're both so scary, I guess, because MaSa like could be scared of PiLiPiLi, or if he sees PiLiPiLi, he like sniffs out, he's going for a fast third and all that, he can be like, well, tank push time, and go across.
Both of these players pretty much pride themselves on their unpredictability. I mean, MaSa especially was one of the first big players, especially in the like North American scene and stuff. I mean, I call back to WCS Challenger Season 1 of last year versus Neeb, where he was doing all of the proxy shenanigans, where he'd proxy as third base, he's proxy. Every single game pretty much was like a proxy or something weird from MaSa to throw off and mess with Neeb, I remember, or Scarlet. But PiLiPiLi is also a guy who used to pride himself on just having a ton of different things that he could do to get in his opponent's head. So this is why I'm actually really excited about this series, because even as we're trying to talk about this, there are so many things that even we're not really necessarily going to pick up on, because unless you're there for every single ladder game of MaSa versus Pili, there's going to be so many mind games going on that are based on things that they've done in the past versus each other. All those kinds of things are so much fun to watch.
But then it also could have been, or still can be, that PiLiPiLi tries to be the aggressor and MaSa's mechanics still send him through. Because again, like you're 5 seconds late on that tank, or 8 seconds late on those additional barracks, or you try and get the add-ons additional barracks. Those type of things could actually lead to the snowball effect that Blink Soccers are always looking for.
Absolutely. All right. Well, game number 3, it looks like it's going to be Kairos Junction. So we'll see how things pan out. Again, we really have no idea. So far, MaSa has not really been the aggressive one outside of like harassment forces like the Banshees and stuff in game number 1. But I know he definitely has a couple of builds out there that he likes to get aggressive with. We'll see if he even feels like it's something he can do versus Pili. Because again, Pili's usually the one going to get in his face, not the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, so far Pili has been doing the natural, getting to the Nexus setup, not doing any chrono forward gateways or the proxy gateway type thing. But MaSa, like typically you would say that the Terran is the one that gets the super early game pressure potential. The proxy barracks is one of the fastest hitting things ever, right?
Interesting position for that SCV. So he's going to end up proxying a second barracks over here. So to Pili, this is going to look pretty normal so far, because he's going to move in over there. He's going to see a barracks up on the high ground, which was normally timed. He's going to see the supply depot over there. He's going to harass this. He's not even going to move in to see the second gas geyser immediately or anything, which wouldn't actually reveal a whole lot over here, because MaSa's not going for that second gas geyser.
Yeah, the really cool thing about this is that there's like really no way to tell. Like you don't see your opponent's mineral bank, which would be rising to almost 400 as you get the command center.
And MaSa's just going to have that SCV on the low ground around the time the command center would probably be coming down. So even if Pili moved back in over there, he would have just seen SCV and thought, this is just going to be a command center probably.
And then, going back to what I said after that first game, is that if Pili were to duck in again and be like, oh, the command center's on low ground, he might think it's on high ground.
Another quick thing, as we do see a tech lab being thrown up, so this is probably going to be the Marauder thing. One thing we've seen actually from Pili is that he gets the pylon to low ground extremely late.
Yeah.
It's not his third pylon or even his second pylon like a lot of pros players do. He gets like his fourth or fifth pylon as his low ground. So his natural expansion, his Nexus is just sitting there with no pylon for the first half of the game, basically.
That is a very good point, and something that I noticed in the very first game, because it went back to like, wow, this guy is so bold not to scout. That's something that MaSa might actually know about him, or in this case might even scout out. The Reaper, primarily looking for Stargate, Robo or Twilight Council, but then secondary might be like, hey, no.
That is big.
I just thought, like, the probe, if it had only seen the natural, might have thought there was a command center on the high ground building and MaSa was being super safe. But now it gets the confirmation that there's just no command center.
He scouts every square foot of that main base and sees no second gas geyser. I think that this build has actually been relatively common on the NA ladder, so Pili should have a decent idea about it. He's looking for the proxy.
Okay, thank goodness.
Yeah, but he's still not getting up a pylon with that natural. Usually, you end up seeing a Protoss player saying, I need to get up a lot of shield batteries. I need to start getting up at depths or sentries. Units that won't take the extra damage with the Marauders.
His probe is actually going really far out, because this is almost assuredly the other proxy barracks.
Oh, no.
Without that second gas.
Losing that first Stalker, I don't actually know if you can defend this anymore.
Yeah, this is a terrible start. Like, his Robo's only just finishing up here. He's trying to chrono out a Stalker, but he doesn't even have a pylon on, like, the ramp, so, like, a high ground shield battery.
Yeah, and MaSa's being smart about this. He starts up a bunker at the natural, but he's going straight to the main base. He does not want to waste any time, because he knows that units are going to be on the way, so now is the time to attack. Pros being pulled off the line. They're going to be able to get in potentially and start to snipe off the SCV build in the bunker, but these Marauders, he's looking for the surround on the Marauders.
Pretty good micros so far, and he does get that one Stalker with the one Marauder. These Marines and, well, the single Marauder, the Reaper even helping out a ton with a couple of grenades and its DPS are killing so many probes. The bunker will not finish, but 20 probes were lost.
I mean, PiLiPiLi's down to 8 workers, guys. If I wanted to paint a bit of a dream here for PiLiPiLi, it would be that MaSa somehow unplugs his keyboard after accidentally attack moving his own command center. This is looking really bad.
Yeah, this is such devastating damage that even while MaSa is on one base, actually he just kind of started his second one, that's fine. He does have a ton of time to have this supreme economic advantage, so that even if PiLiPiLi were to put everything into an attack, you know, he could barely afford it. He'd afford one War Prism and be like, let's go. And hey, an Immortal and War Prism can do a lot. That might actually be his best bet. He's just going into probes.
Yeah, he's trying to make, he can't even afford to make 2 workers at a time right now because he doesn't even have as many workers as you start with. Now, the Stalker does go down. He snipes off a couple more bio units here. The Immortal is kind of scary, but a Cyclone comes out for MaSa, and that is going to be really tough because an Immortal with some backup, yeah, you can deal with a Cyclone. Immortal without backup, no, you don't deal with a Cyclone.
Yeah. And maybe, again, a War Prism could potentially be harassment. It'd still be not game ending. There'd just be enough for MaSa to defend. And remember, his second barracks, really, while closer to his opponent, is still very close to reinforcing his home.
Oh, man. So I'm so glad that MaSa actually decides to take a little bit of the aggression to PiLiPiLi and force him to reconsider the whole no low ground pylon there, no ability to make shield batteries or anything. I'm amazed that PiLiPiLi is still being so aggressive with the Immortal and the Sentry. I guess Stim's a ways away from finishing, so like if something really happened, you could force field a little bit and try and retreat, but there's concussive shell Marauders. If you get caught, like, it's gone. The Immortal dies.
I was just going to say that MaSa doesn't even have to really wait for Stim or Medivacs, which are usually the two things you would be hoping to have. Like, he could just go as soon as he has a tank, and PiLiPiLi agrees.
He's just like, oh, you do have all of that stuff there. MaSa taking game number 3.
Yeah, really nicely done, even with the mistake of letting the probe in, which, if there was a low ground pylon, maybe that's enough time to start a couple shield batteries. That's still actually, the attack was literally hitting. So.
It was, the attack was 4 to 5 seconds away when PiLiPiLi finally saw everything. So PiLiPiLi had an extra 4 to 5 seconds, which given his setup was not enough to actually get up. And also having a Stalker so far forward, losing that first Stalker, imagine if it's there for a little bit longer, the probes are actually alive, you maybe do a little bit better. I think it's still extremely tough. I still give a huge amount of favoritism to MaSa with that, but losing the Stalker definitely sucks. I think PiLiPiLi maybe didn't have the best read on that.
Yeah, I'm also seeing, it felt like his Robo was late, but I guess that was just such an early attack. Like, no, and the Robo seems like it would have been one of the better things to have because you could have cranked out an Immortal, but you would have had to buy some amount of time, and shield batteries for even more time buying would be crucial.
Yeah, this is a really tough attack to hold. I'm gonna just say, if you're a Terran player struggling out there on the ladder, I'm gonna regret saying this because now it's just gonna be everything I hit, but this attack frustrates a lot of Protoss players out there who don't have a lot of experience or knowledge or good scouting information to hold it because it does come so fast. And concussive shells does cause so many problems. If you don't react absolutely perfectly, you can die really, really fast to this.
Yeah, and then the flip side, to give some, like, I guess, Terran, warning, so like, you don't just think you're going to win every single time. If you do get surrounded, if you don't get the freebie first Stalker, if your Reaper dies scouting, and then they do get a surround on your units with probes, you really are still mostly depending on those Marauders. It's just a nice benefit to have a couple extra Marines. But because MaSa got the first Stalker, no shield batteries, and the Reaper provided a little bit extra DPS and a couple of grenades to stop any surrounds. Also, his micro is pretty good. You walk up that ramp and you're like, I do things like MaSa does, and then you die and you're like, well, that was disappointing.
Yeah, trying to do things like MaSa does oftentimes does not work out exactly as you're thinking.
Yeah.
But next map, it looks like is going to be King's Cove. Remember now, MaSa sitting up 2-1. This is a best of 5 of the quarterfinals. And there is actually a decent amount of stake here. Not only is it making to the semifinals, and I know PiLiPiLi was actually saying, he felt comfortable and confident versus MaSa, which I know that there are a lot of NA players and stuff who will say those kind of things and they don't really mean it. But PiLiPiLi is actually one of the guys who usually, he's actually a little bit more self-detrimental or self-deprecating about his performance. He's like, yeah, I haven't really been playing. No, I'm just gonna meme in over here, see what I can do. But I'm really hopeful to see how he can actually play this out. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to give these guys a little bit of time to think about what they want to do in game number 4. So don't go anywhere. You're watching the World Championship Series Challenger Season 1. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, where we're going to be moving into game number 4 of this awesome NA Mimi match. My name is Fear Dragon, and I'm still here with Zombie Grab. It is still her birthday. It has not had 24 hours to pass, not the next day. Would you like it if a Terran player advanced on to the next round? Would that be a good birthday gift?
Actually, I don't really care about that.
Really?
I know, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm down for that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any preference on PiLi or MaSa or anything? Just as players?
Do I? I don't know, because PiLiPiLi can be a fun player.
He is.
But I guess I assumed MaSa was going to make it through, so I'm kind of on that thing.
Yeah. I'm also with you on that. And I think another really cool thing that is worth mentioning, and I started hinting at this before we had to go to a break, before the break, but
yeah,
words. But the players that managed to make it to the top 4 also, on top of being able to make it closer and closer to being crowned the regional champion and everything, they also get a spot at WCS Spring. Flight, hotel, everything paid for. Both of these guys, especially for the North American Challenger players, these are the guys who wouldn't likely go to WCS Spring or Summer and everything, because it is very expensive for the North American players to fly out. A lot of these guys are in school and everything, so it's harder. But if you manage to make it to the semifinals, suddenly makes a lot more sense. So Whoever manages to make it one round further is going to get that shot at going to WCS Spring in Kiev.
Yeah, it is like arguable that it's more important, might not be the right word, but it's just not realistic for a lot more NA players to go to a European tournament for two reasons. One, travel, and money, and then two, it's just the time that they actually would need to go there, and the amount of money that they're kind of like almost in a way gambling to get, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to think of it this way, guys. If you have to spend, say, $800 or like $1,000 on a plane ticket and your hotel and everything else there, I mean, hotel is going to be even more than that, right?
Yeah.
Then to break even on the event, if you don't have, a sponsor or whatever paying for it, you have to place pretty dang well. You have to get like group stage 3 or further. Actually, it's even further with the how the knockout bracket stuff is going to work. So it is really, really tough. It is, as you were saying, like a bit of a gamble. Like you're gambling on your own skill, and not every NA player is going to feel confident about that.
Yeah, and as much as we would like for every player to just be full of passion and just do whatever to give us games, like it's things you definitely have to consider.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are young. Finances are not they're not exactly banking insane amounts of money at the young age of 18 or 19.
Yeah. And we did see the sign-up list, and I think that the number of NA players just like it was a little low. So the SCV is in here, and it's going to hide. So it's going to be able to scout if the Reaper can't. In fact, the Reaper could just focus on killing probes, which is usually not its main job because it's SCV.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to see Command Center on the low ground again. There's that hidden probe for PiLiPiLi that managed to get an amazing scout last game, but just a little bit late. So this time when he moves in, he should be able to see the Command Center. And he'll also see the reactor plopping down the factory and stuff after that Reaper makes its way across the map. And kind of funny, we do actually see this time MaSa looking around for the probe with that Reaper. Because he said, 3 games in a row, you sent this probe in and hidden around the map and then moved in right after the Reaper goes out. This time I'm going to get you, but probe actually manages to still get his scout in. Nicely done.
Yeah, sees the factory is, I mean, that would be at home with a command center on the low ground, but it's always nice to check if there's a Marine follow-up or not. And in this case, just by the threats of it coming back, the Reaper had to kind of stay at home. So you're not worried about dealing with it attacking your probes, and you're not worrying about it actually in general in your base, so you can send the Stalker out. Oh. But again, the SCV's there, so it's a little awkward.
God, the fact that there's still that SCV there, it throws me back to games that I've seen MaSa play recently where he's actually like versus some other NA players. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Dolan or something. He proxied the starport inside of his opponent's main base because he said, well, that's the last plate there's ever scout. So MaSa is a scary guy if you let those SCVs or whatever sit around. But he's just going to go for the scout. Whoa, Stalker gets super aggressive. He's going to be able to get the recall off, though.
Yeah, he will. Because the Reaper died. If that Reaper had hopped up and hopped back down to help, then it would be a different story. So the SCV got the scout. It wasn't the entire scout technically, but you kind of assume that 2 extra gateways are on the way. The point is, it's all the robo. So you know what they're starting off with. The potential of that Warp Prism opener, and the any Blink Stalker attacks are going to be like much later, if ever. And King's Cove is kind of another deadly Blink Stalker map. So.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of space with those Blink Stalkers, but the Hellions being scouted out, and even just taking 1 or 2 shots does make a difference. Stalkers are nice at surviving versus Hellions, but they don't do the damage to Hellions very quickly, so it does sometimes leave your probes a little bit more open, exposed. Warp Prism's going to actually catch these Hellions, though. I mean, the Hellions at least get a scout on things, though.
Well, that is kind of preferable for PiLiPiLi. I was just going to say that MaSa's 2 Hellions, as speedy as they are and as few units as there are for Protoss, they can usually get a second scout, so they see that maybe a Twilight Council was thrown down very shortly after the robo, or in this case, they might have seen it was a Robotics Bay, which would have been a really great scout. But now they're too weak to do that.
Yeah. Only 1 Hellion even alive, and it barely has any hit points. The Warp Prism decides not to just dive into the main base or anything. The Adepts are going to shade forward, try and right-click down some of the SCVs. He goes after a Hellion instead because the SCVs are out of range, and with only 2 Adepts left, he cannot one-shot the workers anymore. So he gets 1 building a depot, and then is going to lose all 3 Adepts. But I think that was still about as much as PiLiPiLi was probably going to be able to ask for. The Cyclone really makes it hard for the Warp Prism to move in.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, if you had really wanted to impress us, I guess you could have waited for the lock on an Adept and then came back in. But
yeah.
The War Prism being alive is, I guess, number 1. Now it's got some Zealots inside of it to buy time. PiLiPiLi should be afraid of an earlier attack, especially because MaSa has a Raven. He probably figured MaSa would have a Raven because he's done that every single game. And if you are able to get a very smooth, uninterrupted attack to a person who's going for Colossus, Raven, it's pretty bad.
The friendly fire from the Siege Tank actually covering a bunch of those SCVs, a bunch of them in the yellow and the orange. He is starting to repair up that Siege Tank, so he'll keep it alive. Nicely done. But, you know, some nice moves there for PiLiPiLi. If he is able to put on some additional pressure later on, those SCVs might still be lower on hit points.
If MaSa were to get that War Prism, it just takes so much, like, pressure off your back.
Yeah.
There's no chance of anything stopping you from moving forward, if that is your plan. And just in general, no potential for further harassment. But MaSa still does not know for a fact that it is Colossus, which, you know, maybe in the second game he was also going to do that because that was a robo, but then that was the proxy barracks game, so he wouldn't know. Does MaSa figure that PiLiPiLi would do that up the robo first? Is he a Colossus player? As you said, we don't get to see their ladder games all the times, and they are unpredictable. So I'm a little surprised that maybe not even a scan's going down, but predicting Colossus could be... It is fine in this case, right?
Yeah. Hallucinate Phoenix comes forward, so PiLiPiLi keeps an eye on MaSa's army and sees how many Siege Tanks there are, and also saw that the starport is just now finishing up that reactor. Now remember, there was the Viking, there was the Raven that came out for MaSa, and there's actually a scan. So he's going to see the Robo and the Robo Bay now. He's not going to see if it's Disruptor or Colossus, but even if he assumes it's Colossus, there's still this awkward moment where he says, okay, well, I've already used a lot of my starport time on getting out the Viking and the Raven. I still need to get out my medevacs, though, so you can't really start on Viking production or anything yet.
No, not quite. So PiLiPiLi did not go back into pro production as his third was finishing, which usually is what kind of happens with Protoss. Yeah. He also delayed like extra tech structures, or wait, did he cancel them? Am I crazy? I could have sworn he was getting extra thing. Okay, well, anyways.
Oh, just more gateways, yeah.
Yeah, just more gateways. Okay. But the point is, like, he has not gotten any further tech, so he is going for an attack despite having this third Nexus up and running.
And he is up a bit in army supply right now, 62 to 49. Next round of production. The first 2 medevacs popping out over here is pretty big for MaSa.
Marine's gonna be a good scout forward.
Yep.
Very good scout.
He's gonna know any siege tanks are on siege him up, get him in position. That's 3 Colossus and a Disruptor coming across the map, I believe. There is a little bit of harassment on the other side of the map, just scouting around the third, and MaSa should see. Well, actually, there's a surprising number of probes over here because PiLiPiLi has actually transferred a lot of the probes from the main base where he's not fully saturated over to the third, trying to sell the story that this is not necessarily going to be a big all-in.
Yeah, that's a very good sell. The other way you could maybe tell is that the Twilight Counts on the Forge are so darn late, but that's unlikely to get in the main base. So he is going to be, he's going to have to play defensive. He actually can't take this army on if he tries to jump on top of it. He barely has any Marauders here. It's actually just pure Marine tanks, so he is depending on the tanks or the interference matrix to get the job done.
I'm also going to lose 2 depots over here. That one Viking whittling away at the Colossus. I mean, he got a Observer pick off, which is definitely pretty nice. And PiLiPiLi, he's starting up +1. He's getting up another Robo, getting a Blink, adding on a bunch of pylons because he was actually supply block for a long time. Those are those mechanics we were talking about before. He might actually just go back into probing after this. He's already been probing a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. He's made like 6 or 7 extra probes, so he is kind of fully saturated.
The Disruptors are going to really open up the opportunity for PiLiPiLi, though, to try and deny this third base for a little bit. As you're going to start to see, Hallucinated Archon's going to try and absorb the Siege Tank damage, and then he's going to maybe move in here.
Yeah. They take an anti-armor missile. They take... Okay, well, another one comes down, so that's a pretty good one.
Disruptor hit, though, obliterates so much of the bio. The Siege Tanks not really in range of most of this army anymore. The Colossus whittle away at the remaining bio. The command center is going to have to lift off. There's just enough stalkers over here to try and push this back. And PiLiPiLi is still warping in more units of that Warp Prism.
That was scary for both sides. The tanks were not touched, so they were doing a lot of damage on the front line, the actual front line units once the Archons are gone. And then the anti-armor missile blanketed the entire Protoss army, but the Disruptor shot almost made up for everything. It also was almost the sickest timing. 1-1 in combat shields had not finished after that first part of the fight.
He's not done. These are slow Zealots, and they're not even leading the charge. There goes a big Disruptor shot, hits on a ton of the bio again, but the Siege Tank count is so high now that PiLiPiLi, I don't really think he can try and move in here realistically. He's adding on double Immortal behind this. He has kept his Colossus and his Disruptors alive, but that angle versus, what is that, 6 Siege Tanks with a 7th on the way, I don't really think you can push in there.
Well, that is what is keeping MaSa alive. Otherwise, he has lost so much bio that PiLiPiLi should still feel okay about this game, right? Even if he can't break MaSa, and at this point he has not denied the third base, he still has kept his really expensive slow-building units alive. He still has the control on MaSa's side of the map while getting upgrades and further tech on his base. Stalkers do have Blink now, but to blink into that many tanks would be suicide.
He loses a lot of health and also a few Stalkers over there, just trying to snipe off of one of the siege tanks. MaSa on top of the repair, which I really love, and he's also on a higher worker count. He's adding on a 4th command center, and I have to say, while Pili is getting up some more upgrades, he's getting up more disruptors, I really feel like, versus that many tanks, something like Charge is really helpful. You're seeing he's having trouble closing the distance.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he's pushing in here. Does he realize that the depth of tanks goes back much farther than this? He is grabbing, a tank and a couple of bio units, but it's no longer just pure Marine. It's got a lot of Marauders, so they're not dying that fast. Now even Liberators are out to really help here, and I do love MaSa's choice to just play super defensive. And if he does get a 4th base eventually, that would be great.
Yeah, it seems like Pili's goal here is just keep darting between the natural and the 3rd base until MaSa is caught out of position, or the disruptor count builds up high enough that he can actually start sniping off some of these tanks. But so far it is not working, and MaSa, realizing that those tanks have been giving him so much coverage, just sending out a drop because he can actually afford to do it. He's got the Liberators sieged up, and there's no starport on the way. There's no Tempest going to be coming out soon. It's just the Stalkers. They're going to eat so many tank shots just to snipe off one Liberator.
Yeah, that wasn't really that worth it. MaSa, just build the 4th base in your main. There we go. There we go. And he will eventually have better upgrades, a 2-2 on the way. Finally getting Marauders slow to finish up. The drops are now entering into that 3rd base, and PiLiPiLi has continuously just warped in. He literally just warped in with that Warp Prism on the offense. So does he have any proper protection back at home? He has 7 gateways in total.
Okay, MaSa sees the army at the natural with the sensor tower and also poking forward. So he moves in with that double drop, finding a couple of probes, finds that Pili is looking to take a 4th base, but MaSa's going to make sure that it actually becomes a 3rd base because he's going for the Nexus.
Wait.
Recalls he only goes after the pylons.
Wait, I don't know why the bio was out there, but the half recall was a little awkward. That means that the frontline army certainly has to retreat in case MaSa would try and siege up on him, but that is kind of the important thing, is that MaSa is still so siege-based.
Oh, it's going to be like a 1-2, just disruptors.
Oh, PiLiPiLi wasn't even trying to, I guess there's only so much he could do. They probably still would have been targeted down.
I think he was actually, he has 2 disruptors rallying across the map as well, which are in a very vulnerable spot. They almost walked into the sensor tower. They barely managed to avoid it, and he is pulling them back to the rest of his army. But the big thing that Pili has been building up this game are disruptors. So losing 3 of them really hurts. He was almost going to be up to 7 disruptors, which with 8 and 9 coming out, that actually would have been pretty scary no matter what for MaSa.
Yeah, that was a pretty perfect trade there for MaSa, who kept his medevacs alive to go back home, so he's still pumping out other non-medevac things
Liberator
from
of the natural of Pili is going to siege up, and once again, he doesn't really have any units over there. The Warp Prism wasn't warping in any units, so he has his weapons available, but the Liberator actually very, very on point and immediately unsieges, goes over the main base. The Stalker's not paying attention because Pili is trying to take an engagement over here. He misses the disruptor shots and doesn't actually get any of the tanks there.
That was very awkward of PiLiPiLi to take that fight. Maybe if he had blinked everything to the south, but I think that was a lot more awkward for PiLiPiLi, who is still, exactly, not dealing with his Liberator, getting even more probe kills. Pili might be on 4 base, but he's below 60 workers. His army is getting increasingly worse, which is kind of weird to say as far as a Protoss versus Terran in 14 minutes. He's never added on Charge. He didn't get on a second Forge.
Yeah.
And obviously no way to get to the Stargate and the Tempest. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, Pili is going to try and move in. The siege tanks are on the low ground, and the disruptor hits are going to be pretty dang nice right now. The Colossus also holding their own for quite a bit of time, but look at that Stalker count compared to the Liberators. The Liberators are going to start murdering all the ground units, and guess what? With no more air or ground support, sniping off those Liberators, it seems like MaSa is going to be able to push Pili back on top of killing 17 workers and still whittling away at that 4th base.
Yeah, really nicely done.
Yeah.
MaSa has a hold of this. Pili has taken a couple of odd fights. You would say also some odd decision-making to try and just stay here and not advance forward with his army type. And I think he's kind of just thrown the game there, even though he's not ready to give up yet. But oh my god, plinking into the tank shots and leaving the Colossus
no escape,
unprotected on the backside.
That's going to be GG right there. He is sitting down on almost 100 supply. MaSa takes the series 3-1 and showcases that his late game mechanics are a little bit better. I have to say, I do think that that game goes to PiLiPiLi. Clearly not being able to play as much StarCraft these days, you know, busy with not only school, but also a lot of other stuff. And you saw that he doesn't really feel super comfortable with like the transition points. He was very slow to take a fourth. He didn't feel like, oh, I should get a Stargate to get up Tempest or anything. He was making a lot of decisions saying, I want to end the game right here. Oh god, that was the moment that could have gone amazingly for PiLiPiLi, almost.
Yeah, but it's like, as I guess the Terran player, I'm looking at the orange on the Protoss army against tanks, and I'm like, whoa. Even though the Disruptor shot was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe PiLiPiLi, who has like, if he was really focusing on his macro too, you know, and practicing really hard on that, would have been more than happy to contain and expand and advance tech. And if you get to 4 bases with the charge as well to make sure that they don't push into you without something to hold on, and you get a Tempest, for instance, then you continue controlling them. It gets tough, but you know, the hesitancy to advance on, but then also MaSa's drop, I think, really messed him up. Really made him reconsider how he's playing this game. And then from there, it felt like all of his engagements actually weren't great, which is kind of what is a strong suit for the rest of the series. Absolutely.
Well, congratulations to MaSa. He is going to be our first player for the quarterfinals to advance on to the semifinals. And that does mean he gets that spot at WCS Spring. So you will be seeing him there, I'm assuming that he's all readily available and whatnots. But we'll see who he's going to be facing off next against, because our next match is also going to be a fun one. I am super excited about this. Jon Snow versus Silky is really cool because both these players from Skystorm Gaming, both of them American Zerg players, both of them good friends with each other, and Silky kind of becoming the new consistent Zerg player of North America, the title that Jon Snow used to hold. We're going to see if he still does, as we're going to be moving into that Zerg versus Zerg in a little bit. Don't go anywhere. You're watching WCS Challenger.